The bill on the governor's desk will require school districts to create and implement a policy on discrimination and harassment of race, national origin, or color. 23 News reporter Connor Hollingsworth talks with lawmakers and educators about the importance of this legislation to stomp out hate in students and possible discrimination by faculty members.
According to the Government Accountability Office, 1 in 4 students aged 12 to 18 saw hate words or symbols written in their schools. Rockford Representative Maurice West sponsored the bill in the House. He says it's the teachers who championed this legislation after seeing it firsthand.
You should feel comfortable, if needed, to report what was done to you without losing your job, without getting a bad grade.
Senate Bill 90 cracks down on hate crimes in schools, requiring each district to create, implement and maintain a policy on discrimination based on race, colour or national origin. The idea came from Teach Plus, a coalition of educators in Illinois.
93% of the teachers throughout the state said this is needed.
Some districts are getting a head start. In the Meridian School District, the board started diversity training, hoping it trickles down to staff and students.
The board has gone through the training. We are now back at the stage of bringing it back to the board to say, hey, can I get money to train everybody?
The bill will also require districts to track incidents of discrimination. Meridian Superintendent PJ Capozzi likes that idea, but questions how the district can monitor incidents that happen outside of the classroom.
In concept, fully supportive. The hard part becomes when somebody says, hey, this person said something racist, and then we investigate it and there either was nothing to it or there's no proof.
But West says after this bill passes, lawmakers plan to establish a team to snuff out hate in other areas, like social media.
There's not much oversight on that. So I plan on putting together a new working group over the summer to find out what we need to do to strengthen our cyberbullying laws.
Now, the Illinois State Board of Education will create this data collection system to help each district track each instance of hate speech or harassment.
The bill passed the House in Springfield by a vote of 87 to 13 and unanimously in the Senate. It will now head to the governor's desk.